Welcome to Hauntings at Dusk, true ghost stories and fiction UK with me, author Tina Vantyler. Today's episode is a true ghost story called Red Roses, the house that wanted order. Anna's widowed mother calls, begging for help. Her new house is perfect. Too perfect, because someone else is keeping it that way. Silently, methodically, as if they still live there. Red Roses, the house that wanted order. A year after Dad's death, my mum decided to move to a new home, hoping to escape the memories that haunted our old place. "I can't bear it here," she told me sadly. "I keep expecting to hear your dad's key in the lock or see him sitting in his armchair in front of the TV, grumbling and flicking through channels with the remote. Yes, he could be annoying, but I miss him after 34 years together." Despite suggestions by me and my sister Tanya that Mum bought a flat, which would be more manageable than another house, Mum, having inherited money from her Auntie May, stubbornly chose to move somewhere even bigger than our original family home. "Soon you and your sister will have little ones and there'll be plenty of room for extended family," she told me. "Plus I can keep a bedroom for you both." I sighed at this. I was 20, away at university, and had no plans to return to live with Mum. Nor would Tanya, a civil servant with a flat in London. "You'll be lucky," I told her. "Tanya's never had a relationship, and I won't be having kids for years, if ever." I'd met a boy, Vince, at uni, and Mum moved into her new house with Tanya's help while me and Vince were on holiday in Brittany. The house was still in Chester, but far enough from our old one that Mum wasn't constantly surrounded by the walks and restaurants she'd frequented with my father. Dad had been a gentle soul and I missed him a lot, and he'd had a calming effect on Mum, who was naturally an anxious person. I worried about Mum rattling around a big empty house. Although she still saw her friends, they were a drive away rather than on the doorstep. One night I rang her and she sounded even more agitated than usual. Mum had been in the house about 2 months and I had yet to visit due to my uni commitments. We chatted about this and that and eventually I said, "Mum, what's wrong?" She paused. "I think I might have made a mistake buying this house." "It is bigger than you need," I began, but she cut in. "It's not that. There seems to be something here with me." I asked her to explain. "It's as though this thing is trying to look after me in a way, trying to be helpful. The other day I'd pulled the laundry out of the tumble dryer and left it in a heap on the kitchen table while I answered the door to the postman. When I went back it was folded in a pile, towels and tea towels. Then yesterday I made myself a cup of tea and forgot about it in the kitchen as I'm still unpacking. You know I like my tea hot, so an hour on I went to put it in the microwave. But when I picked up the cup it was so hot I dropped it on the floor. Last week I'd popped to the bathroom first thing in the morning and came back to find the bed had been made, differently from how I do it." I listened with increasing alarm. Mum was only in her 50s, but you hear about people getting early dementia and I wondered if this was a sign. What she was saying was bonkers. "You're still grieving for Dad," I said firmly, "and grief can do funny things to your mind." "Can you come down?" asked Mum. "Tanya's away on business and she can't." Again, this worried me. Mum was very self-sufficient and this wasn't like her. A long bank holiday weekend was coming up, so I arranged for me and Vince to visit. Vince is a shy person, but I managed to persuade him. A week later, on Friday, Vince and I caught the train and walked the few minutes to Mum's from the station. My first surprise was the house. I'd seen it in photos and not paid much attention, but now, as we went up the short path, I took in the beauty of the old detached house with its honey-coloured stone walls that looked freshly scrubbed and white front door. The second surprise was my mum. It had only been 10 weeks since I'd last seen her, but encountering her on the doorstep, I tried not to gasp at the transformation, her once plump cheeks now thin and pinched. I hugged Mum and introduced her to Vince, who, as usual, had his hands stuck in the pockets of the denim jacket he never took off. Mum then took us on a tour of the house. The square entrance hall, with its door to the front room on the left, wide stairs dead ahead, and dining room door to the right, felt unnervingly silent, the thick grey carpet swallowing our footsteps. Although attempts had been made to brighten the hall with white walls, I could see that, with the doors shut, the only natural light would come from a tiny glass panel in the front door, along with another faint glow from the stairway window. The overall effect was rather gloomy. We walked through the dining room to the kitchen. "Mum, this place looks brand spanking new," I said, running my fingers over the kitchen island's marble worktop. "When the previous owners renovated, they ripped all the old stuff out. I'd be surprised if there's anything left a ghost could be attached to." Vince looked at me as if I were nuts. "The basic fabric of the house is unchanged," he said. "Bricks, foundations, walls, and the rest." Mum left the room and I turned to Vince. "We're here to help Mum feel better about the house, not worse," I hissed. "Keep your sensible observations to yourself, please." The large kitchen had been expanded sideways. At the back, down a step, a doorway led to a tiny utility room containing Mum's washing machine with the dryer beside it. "Cute little room," said Vince, going in. "Unusual. I like this window at the side. It's only a couple of feet square." I made myself, Mum and Vince a coffee and we carried them through to the lounge, where Mum was arranging 2 side tables by the sofa. "You expect ghostly activity, if there is any, to take place at night," she said worriedly, accepting a drink as we sat down. "But here all the strange things happen in daylight. Does that mean my ghost is stronger than a normal one, do you think?" "I don't believe ghosts come in different strengths, Mum," I sighed. She was still registered with her own GP and I planned to urge her to visit him. "I take sugar now to fatten myself up," said Mum. "I'll fetch it." Off she went to the kitchen. Minutes later we heard pottery shattering, followed by a gasp. We rushed in to find Mum, a smashed mug at her feet, staring at the floor. A strong smell of lavender pervaded the room, and a set of white footprints on the grey tiled floor led from the utility room to the cooker, where they stopped, toes towards it. "Those weren't here a minute ago," muttered Vince. Mum stood with her brow furrowed, mesmerised by the footprints. Vince had stated the obvious, and I couldn't think what else to say. "But why white prints?" I asked. "Is it flour?" "No," said Vince from by the utility room. "It's soap powder. The box has been tipped over." On its side, the lavender-scented family-sized carton poked over the edge of the washing machine. Half the contents had fallen out of the top and were heaped on the floor. The footprints led from here into the kitchen. "I'm sure it's a lady ghost," said Mum, shaking her head. "She was nice and tidy before. This isn't like her. Something's upset her." What could I say? The 3 of us had been together in the lounge when the footprints appeared, and they were indeed smallish prints, yet bigger than a child's. Mum insisted on sweeping up the soap powder and cup fragments while I mopped the spilt coffee. To distract us all, we took Mum for lunch at a nearby pub. Back at the house, neither me nor Vince saw anything else weird, and we weren't troubled by restless spirits or anything else during our 2 nights in my new bedroom. However, Mum reported incidents, such as cutlery arranging itself on the table and her bedside clock flying across the room. On Saturday, she showed us a large painting of a country scene with the glass smashed, which she said had leapt off the wall in the back room while Vince and I had been out for a stroll. I wasn't sure what to do for the best. On the Sunday, I left her and Vince in the lounge and went upstairs to find my book. That's when the next odd thing happened that I witnessed. Halfway up the stairs was a landing before the steps curved around to the left. I began to run up the steps as I normally did, then I paused on the landing, my heart speeding up. The atmosphere had thickened somehow. The air grew denser, and I felt the sensation of something bulky and squashy, like a well-padded body, press against my arm, causing me to stumble against the wall. The sensation was overwhelming and terrifying, but I remained rooted to the spot, unable to cry out or move. Seconds passed. Then, gathering my energy, I managed to haul myself off the landing and rushed up the stairs to the top. I turned back to look down the staircase. There was nothing to see, but the air on the landing seemed to shimmer slightly. Shaken, I grabbed my novel and hurried down the stairs, this time meeting no resistance on the landing. In the lounge, panting, I described what I'd experienced. "Told you," said Mum. "She's got stronger. She's never pressed up against me." "How can you be so matter-of-fact about it?" I cried. "You can't stay here." Mum's chin trembled and she gave a brief smile. "I have a feeling I can't explain, but I think I need to wait this out. It's important to me that you're here, though." An hour passed. Then Mum explained. "I've remembered something. The woman I bought the house from called me one day to ask what the hold-up was with the sale. I have her number on my phone. How about I call her and ask if she knows anything about what's going on?" Vince and I crowded around Mum as she searched through her phone. "Here it is. June House," I called her. She pressed the number and got an answer phone. "This is Annabelle, who bought your lovely house," she said into the answer phone. "I'd love to ask you a question, nothing sinister, and I'd appreciate a call back." "If asking about a ghost in the house isn't sinister, then I don't know what is," said Vince. "Yes, but she can't say that, can she?" I said. We trooped off to the pub for Sunday lunch, and later the three of us were making dinner in the kitchen when Mum's phone trilled from its spot on the marble island. "House June," said Vince, peering at it. "Put it on loudspeaker, Mum," I said. Mum exchanged pleasantries with June, then she said, "The estate agent told me you oversaw the house renovations." "Yes," came June's warm voice. "It had been our family home, but my mother had lived there alone for years. It needed a lot of work to modernise it, as Mum had always resisted any changes." "Was there any supernatural activity in the house when your mother was alive?" asked Mum, at my urging via gesticulations. June's voice cooled a little. "Why do you ask?" "June," said Mum softly, "I'm happy in this house, and I'm not about to complain to you or the estate agent who sold it to me. But some strange things have gone on, and I'm hoping you can shed some light on them." "Mother never mentioned anything like that," replied June. "But the workmen were there for months, and they described tools being arranged in rows by an unseen hand, ladders being moved, and the work clothes they left on site being found carefully folded." She chuckled. "Mother was always very neat, very house-proud, so we reckoned she came back occasionally." However, we didn't find this amusing. Mum described what she'd witnessed and how the activity had ramped up since Vince and I had arrived. "Not being funny," said June, "but maybe my mother doesn't like your girl or her boyfriend." Then she cried, "No, wait, I have an idea." Mum had been a big lady, but after she got cancer she went very skinny and spent a lot of time on the toilet. Her bowels had gone. It was an outside loo, which we turned into the utility room. Mum loved her garden and, a bit gross I know, but she'd sit with the loo door open so she could see her beloved roses. All Mum's things were out of the house by the time the men started work, but one of them asked if I had anything she'd particularly loved, and I gave him an ornament, a porcelain shoe painted with red roses. He put it on a shelf in the utility room, and the worst of the disturbances stopped. Vince and I had been listening, holding hands, when he suddenly dropped my hand. His cheeks were flushed pink, and I made a "what's wrong" gesture to him. Vince shook his head. "I hadn't noticed a shelf in the utility room," said Mum, picking up the phone and walking towards it. We followed. "Yes, there is one, narrow, very high up. Anna, climb on the washing machine and see if there's a shoe up there." I did so, while Vince looked more and more uncomfortable. "It's empty," I called from my position on the washer. "Just dead blue bottles." "It was at the back, so you couldn't see it unless you were very tall or on a ladder," came June's voice. "Maybe someone moved it. All I can suggest is that you find the shoe and put it back." Mum signed off after arranging to speak to June in a few days. I folded my arms and fixed Vince, 6'3" tall Vince, with a stare. "OK," I said, "what did you do?" Vince took a tiny white shoe from his jacket pocket and laid it on the kitchen island, his eyes avoiding the gaze of both my mother and me. "I didn't mean any harm," Vince stammered. "It's just that I have this fidgeting thing, I guess. Whenever I see small, interesting objects, I tend to pick them up." He smiled weakly. I saw the shoe on the shelf and it was instinct to take it, figuring I'd take a closer look later. I forgot I had it until now. "You can't just nick anything that takes your fancy," I said, my arms still folded, although I'd softened slightly at Vince's admission. He was a bit odd, but I loved him nevertheless. "Sorry," he said. How could I know moving such a small ornament could cause this much trouble? Mum, on the other hand, was visibly annoyed. "Let's turn our attention to what needs to be done. Vince, please put that shoe back where you found it." Reaching up, he positioned it out of sight at the rear of the shelf. As he did so, a shift seemed to occur within the house, as though the building itself had breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at me and Mum in turn. "Did you feel that?" My mum nodded. "Yes," as though harmony has been restored. Vince and I returned to uni the next morning. In the weeks that followed, Mum told me that the ghostly disturbances were back to how they'd been before, but now she found them a source of peace and comfort rather than distressing. "I have a connection to the lady who lived here before me, I think," she told me. "Our stories are similar and I feel a certain kinship with her." Mum's still in the house and often senses the previous occupant in the garden, where my mother spends a lot of time in spring and summer tending the flowers planted by her predecessor, especially the crimson roses. I married Vince, although we still don't have kids to take to Mum's. Luckily, the events at her place shocked him out of his casual kleptomania for good. Thanks for listening to Hauntings at Dusk. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. Join me again in 2 weeks for another shiver-inducing supernatural story. New episodes on the first and third Friday of every month.